The story begins in the year 1600, where Solomon Kane is introduced as a merciless warrior. A captain in the British Navy, Kane leads his men into battle against the Ottoman defenders of a fortress in North Africa. Kane is a man who thrives on violence, and his thirst for blood and power makes him unstoppable. At this point, he seems like a person who has no care for anything beyond his greed and ambition. During one of his raids, Kane and his crew find a hidden castle that is rumored to hold unimaginable treasures. Fueled by greed, they enter the fortress, hoping to claim the riches for themselves. But what they find is far more terrifying than they could have imagined. The castle turns out to be a gateway to hell. Inside, Kane comes face to face with the Devil's Reaper, a horrifying demon. The Reaper tells Kane that his soul is doomed because of the many sins he has committed, sins of murder, greed, and cruelty. The Reaper declares it is time for Kane to pay for his wicked life. Terrified, Kane escapes by leaping out of a window, barely saving himself from eternal damnation. This shocking encounter changes Kane. He returns to England, leaving behind his life of violence and riches. Hoping to find forgiveness for his sins, he takes refuge in a monastery. There, he renounces violence and gives away all his wealth to the church. For a year, he lives a quiet, isolated life, trying to make peace with the horrors of his past. But peace is short-lived for Kane. He has a prophetic dream, and the monastery's abbot becomes convinced that Kane's dark past will bring doom to their sanctuary. The abbot urges Kane to leave and seek his purpose in the West, at his family's ancestral home. With nowhere else to go, Kane wanders the countryside, lost and uncertain about his future. Along the way, he encounters the Crowthorns, a kind and humble family of Christians. The family, consisting of William, his wife Catherine, their young daughter Meredith, and their sons Edward and Samuel, travels cautiously, hoping to reach the coast where they plan to sail to America for a fresh start. Initially, Kane avoids contact with them, wary of involving himself with others. However, fate intervenes when he is ambushed by a group of ruthless brigands. Kane, who has renounced violence, refuses to fight back, even as the brigands beat him mercilessly. He endures their brutal attack without lifting a hand in his defense, clinging to his vow of pacifism despite the overwhelming pain and humiliation. The brigands eventually grow bored and leave him for dead, battered and bloodied in the dirt. The Crowthorns come across Kane in this pitiful state and, despite his grim appearance, decide to help him. They take him in, treating his wounds and offering him food and shelter. Their selfless kindness leaves Kane deeply moved. For a man who had spent his life surrounded by violence and cruelty, the Crowthorns' compassion is both humbling and transformative. As Kane regains his strength under their care, he begins to feel a connection to the family, particularly young Meredith, whose innocent trust reminds him of the good that still exists in the world. Grateful for their aid and inspired by their generosity, Kane decides to accompany the Crowthorns on their journey, vowing to protect them as best he can without breaking his oath of nonviolence. Though he insists he cannot join them in America, Kane's sense of duty to the family grows, and their bond strengthens as they travel together. As they travel together, the group faces many dangers. The land is plagued by evil forces, including brigands and witches. Despite Kane's efforts to protect the family, tragedy strikes. One day, they come upon a burned and ruined village, its people slaughtered by marauding raiders. The charred remains of homes and the silence of death hang heavy in the air. As they cautiously search the area, they hear faint cries coming from beneath the collapsed structure. To their shock, they find a young girl, a survivor, frightened, filthy, and trembling with fear. The Crowthorns, deeply compassionate and caring, immediately take her in, treating her like one of their own. They console her, offering her food, warmth, and safety. But Kane notices something unusual. The girls refuse to pray. Solomon grows suspicious. He takes a cross from Edward and hands to the little girl. The little girl resists to take the cross and starts panicking. Then she marks Meredith's hand and tells her she's the one he wants and turns into her true form, a scary witch, and jumps on Solomon and reminds him that his soul is damned, then disappear. The family and Solomon, shocked by what happens and wondering about the mark the witch made on Meredith's hand, they continue their journey. One day, while they're camping, They are ambushed by a group of raiders serving a dark sorcerer named Malachi. The raiders ask Solomon to break his vow of peace and kill them. If not, they will kill Samuel. When he resists, they kill Samuel in cold blood, then kill Edward and William and capture Meredith. This devastating loss reignites Kane's determination to fight, and he kills the raiders brutally. While he was fighting the raiders, they take Meredith with them. Then he swears to her mother and dying father to rescue Meredith and destroy the evil forces that took her, believing that this mission might save his soul. Kane's quest to rescue Meredith is filled with danger and terror. The land is crawling with supernatural threats, witches, ghouls, and Malachi's followers, who are enslaving the weak and corrupting the strong. During his journey, Kane meets a deranged priest who tells him about Malachi's dark plans. But Solomon comes to a shock when the priests try to feed him to the terrifying and evil creatures that he keeps under the church, but Solomon fights his way through and manages to escape. After escaping the terrifying creatures, faith leads Solomon to the raiders who beat him up earlier. He put them through a brutal beating and asked them what they know about Meredith. When they tell him, she was killed. He kills them with anger. With a sense of great loss, Solomon, feeling lost and sad, steps into a tavern to drink his sorrow away, where his old soldiers notice him and approaches him. They tell him they are fighting against the evil power of Malachi, and they desperately need his leadership. Henry, one of the soldiers, begs him to lead them, saying, "I know what you can do," but Kane resists firmly. That night, after he went to sleep, Kane is captured by Malachi Mans. They mock him for his vow of pacifism and crucify him, leaving him to die. But Kane's resolve is strengthened when he hears Meredith crying out for help. She is being held in a cage by Malachi's men, and her voice gives Kane the will to fight again. He frees himself from the crucifixion cross and falls on the ground. One of Malachi's men comes to finish him while he's on the ground, but Henry and his man comes at a critical moment and save him from Malachi's man. Solomon Kane woke up in a dark cave, lying on the cold ground. Around him, a group of men stood watch, weapons ready. Henry and Garrick, their leader, watched him closely. A woman knelt beside Solomon, tending to his wounds. She was using pagan magic, and Solomon immediately pushed her away. "Don't touch me with your pagan magic," he said, distrustful of her ways. Henry explained why they needed Solomon's help. Malachi, a former priest, had turned to dark powers after making a deal with the devil. Now, Malachi controlled the land with the help of a masked man who could take control of others with just a touch. Henry said their best chance was to kill the masked man first, which would weaken Malachi's power. When Solomon heard that Malachi was hiding in Blacksmith Castle, he froze. The castle was his childhood home, the place where his family had once ruled. Henry told him that the castle had no lord now, and Solomon was shocked to learn his father had died. With his emotions in check, Solomon told the men they would not go through the front gates. He knew a secret way into the castle. The group approached the castle. The area was grim and eerie, with skulls scattered around as a warning to all who came near. Solomon led the group to a hidden grate, and they slipped into the castle courtyard. As they moved, a young girl appeared, one twisted by dark magic. Solomon quickly defeated her, but the fight brought Malachi's soldiers. A battle broke out, and the masked man himself joined in. Solomon fought him, but had to retreat into the castle's tunnels, knowing he couldn't face him head-on yet. Inside the dark tunnels, Solomon discovered the castle dungeons. To his shock, he found his father chained in one of the cells. The old man was weak but alive. He told Solomon the truth about his brother Marcus. He wasn't dead. Marcus had made a deal with Malachi, which turned him into a monster. His father begged Solomon to end his suffering. After a moment of silence, Solomon did what was asked of him, shooting his father to put him out of his misery. It was a hard decision, but Solomon knew it was the only way. Solomon climbed to the upper levels of the castle, determined to stop Malachi. He banged on a large door, demanding to face him. Inside, he found Meredith, a captive girl, locked in a cage. She warned Solomon it was a trap, but he pressed on. When Malachi appeared, he revealed his plan: to use Meredith's blood to summon a creature of great power. Solomon tried to stop him, but was caught in another fight with the masked man. This time, Solomon realized the masked man was his brother Marcus, or what was left of him. Despite the pain, Solomon fought back and won. As Malachi prepared to use Meredith's blood, Solomon made a bold move. He offered his soul in exchange for her safety. But at the last moment, Solomon turned his gun on Malachi, killing him. This caused a chain reaction that destroyed the monster Malachi had summoned. Solomon collapsed, unconscious, as the fight ended. When Solomon woke up, Meredith told him they had defeated the rest of Malachi's forces. The battle was over. Solomon, weary but resolute, visited the graves of his father and brother. He stood silently, reflecting on everything that had happened. Though his journey had cost him dearly, he walked away with a sense of purpose, ready to seek redemption in the days ahead.